So, interesting ways of looking.
Yes, so you're beginning to see that satisfaction and that it is possible to have it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, what this is an introduction to is this is in fact the first step or the Buddha's first knowledge. And not very many people understand, wow, how satisfying this is to make that first step. Because in fact, this is the first step on the noble path. That you're now no longer in the world, you've already taken at least one step out of it.
Yes.
And so the Buddha calls this step supramundane, a factor of the path, noble, and not shared by ordinary folks. And what is that? That thing that you just said, the Buddha says it like this, that no matter how obstructed the mind becomes, the student knows that he can clean that out and come back to the truth.
Is that cleaning out aimed at, I can clean that out at some point and when it's all cleaned out?
Right
or
now. Right now.
Okay.
Whenever that now comes in, that knowledge comes in with it, that I know that I can clean the mind out right now. And so the example that I gave you was sometimes it's okay to not be in that state of satisfaction. For instance, changing a tire. There is a point, and in fact, when you recognize that you're tooling down the road, and then you recognize that the tire is flat. And that's a dissatisfying moment. And you know that you can sit there and become satisfied again before you ever get out of the truck. But eventually you're going to go take a look at this tire to see what the damage is.
But couldn't you still theoretically be satisfied all throughout, because whatever
but you're
is
not there yet.
Yeah.
You're not there yet. And the only way to get there is by becoming satisfied with the fact that you're actually not satisfied all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But if you are dissatisfied with the fact that you're dissatisfied all the time or some of the time, then you're setting up blocks.
Yeah. So we focus more about where I am right now.
Yeah. And so you begin to actually be able to put up with the fact that you got to change a tire and stay fairly well satisfied, that you can stay fairly well satisfied during that time that you're doing it.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
Okay. But now the point that I'm making is that this is actually the first of 7 steps. And that it's really a good idea, if you don't mind, that we go through these things, because understanding these steps really helps put the trip together for a student.
Do these steps have a name, like the whole
Yes.
list?
This is actually the 7 steps of Sotapanna. And the first step is actually a step or path. And the Sotapanna is broken into 2 groups, the path and the fruit of the path. And so we start on the path, and that path is, you know something? Anytime I want to, I can come back and get into a state of satisfaction. And in the process of that, we've already been introduced to a whole lot of stuff. But now here's the second step, and this is kind of interesting, because this one is the one that brings back into place anapanasati. That first step is more like a knowledge that is based upon observation, and it builds confidence. So this third thing is actually confidence.
Sorry, it was just cut off, and then
Okay.
Last thing I heard was just you were saying the second step is?
Okay. Well, actually, I got all the way back to the first step. So let's go back to the first step, because the first step is actually confidence, to where the second one is confidence built in with achievement. And the achievement is the achievement of getting into and being able to maintain and sustain the first jhana. So this is the second knowledge, and that second knowledge is not based upon so much of, let us say, the satisfaction of being able to come back and keep coming back. But this is actually now the point where all of the jhana factors for first jhana are gathered together as skills that have now been developed.
What are the jhana factors again?
All right. The first one is freedom from the hindrances, that the mind is cleaned out completely, which is back to that step one is that you know that you can do that. So now you're in a state of you've done that, and that you recognize that in a way this is quite a remarkable thing, and that if I can do it now, I can do it in the future. So we build into that confidence, gain more confidence and more knowledge about that first one. But now we've actually got these factors together, and the gathering of those factors and the enjoyment of those factors are built in together. And how that's done is through step 10 of Anapanasati, to gladden the mind, to be very satisfied that the mind is free from the hindrances. And so there's many different ways that we can speak of that. The way that I think is so funny is, aha, I caught you. I see you, Mr. Hindrance, and out you go. But whatever way that you need to do that, you change your frame of reference and gladden the mind that this is really good. We can do this. Well, that's back to step one. So we use that quality of step one. Hey, I can do this because I just did it. And with that gladdening of the mind, we brighten the mind. We've got the hindrances clear. And with that brightened mind, then we begin to enjoy the feeling part of it that is so important. And that is the experience of the win is a feeling. That feeling is, aha, I got it. Like winning a race, or getting an A on a test, or relief in some way that you've done the job and you've gotten successful at it. And there's no more work to do. Finding that you got a good grade is one of those places where the students really do feel that relief and the pleasure that the job is done now and that I won.
Yeah. Often when
This is what the Buddha calls rapture, or that's what the English word is, rapture, but the actual word is piti, which is kind of a high. And that's a skill to be developed.
Yeah. Often when
So how good can you feel? Think about it. Don't think about what you're thinking about now. Think about what we're talking about. Think about how good can you feel? How satisfied can you be?
I can be like so satisfied that I'm only just here, that nothing else is necessary.
That's right. And if you start that way and keep practicing that way, how good can you make yourself feel? By practicing this and getting better at it, feeling better and better about how good this feeling is, the practice of the Buddha. Well, dang, now that I think about it, I can make myself feel pretty darn good if I don't mind saying so myself.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah. All right. So this is what piti is. This is something to shoot for. It is a training that needs to be developed. And
Yeah.
that's what gives satisfaction, is because you can make yourself feel really, really good. This is just the beginning of the Buddhist practice.
Hmm.
And the question is, how good can you make yourself feel? How well can you adapt to this step 6 of Anapanasati, a training in feeling good?
It's so there was step 10, which is
Don't
gladdening.
worry about step 10. Let's do step 1, or actually, we're talking about step 2 in the
Yeah.
sense of the 7 knowledges. But we're also working with step 5 of Anapanasati in doing so.
Okay. Yeah, I
That
thought you
you have
mentioned
to
step
get
10
yourself in.
earlier, but okay.
Huh?
I thought you mentioned step 10 earlier, so I was a bit confused where
Step
we
10
are
of
there.
okay. Step 10, not of the ultimate fetters, which is what I thought you meant. It
Yeah,
was step 10
yeah.
of Anapanasati.
No, I'm not going that far ahead.
Yes, step 10 of Anapanasati. But you see, we play Anapanasati the way that you would play a piano.
Hmm.
You don't play one note for 2 years and then play another note for 2 years, and then 3 years later you play one or more notes. All right. Oh no, you start making music with Anapanasati. So there's step 9, which is the same thing as sati, to become aware of what the mind is doing. And with one's right view, we can say that I will come back into that state that I know I'm growing. And I started with it with Anapanasati, so naturally we can talk about coming back to the breath. So the breath is a major component. But also this gladdening the mind and throwing the hindrances out is now a second component. The next component is with that gladdened mind, we feel joyful intentionally so. Right? Thinking about how valuable this teaching is, and it's lasted 2,500 years. And you can just tell yourself all kinds of grandiose stories about how wonderful it is. I just recommend you don't do it in a magical kind of way, because the actual reality of this is pretty darn good all by itself.
Hmm.
Takes you right to the height of humanity, but not much any further than that. And so this is the way of looking at it, and that's the state that you're shooting for. How good can you let yourself feel while you're sitting there taking in breath and out breath, knowing how wonderful this is, and knowing how satisfied you are with it? And that's an important quality, is the satisfaction. Because as soon as things get really, really, really satisfied, you don't have to keep giving yourself a pep talk about how wonderful you feel, and you can just actually settle into that kind of feeling.
Hmm.
And now you've got all the jhana factors together. You've got a mind fit for work. You've got rapture and sukha. Main is sukha. That's satisfaction. In fact, satisfaction is a really, really wonderful word in English, because it actually points to what dukkha really is, and that is a state of dissatisfaction.
Hmm.
And now we have come into a state of real satisfaction, real sukha. And now the trick is, how long can we stay in this state? What are we going to do to get out of it? Well, the hindrances could come back. So let's make sure that no unwholesome thoughts come into the mind. And when we can maintain only wholesome thoughts, and not have any unwholesome thoughts, then that's the sustainment of that state that is considered in this regard, in this way, as the serenity. In other words, the ability to stay where you are. The word serenity is actually not a good word for it. That's translated samatha, but rather stability. And the stability is based in satisfaction, that you're so satisfied that you're going to stay balanced enough to not let anything come in that's going to pull you out of balance.
You said the ability to stay who or where I am?
Well, the ability to stay in satisfaction. The ability to stay satisfied that this moment is good stuff. Right here where I am is just fine. No need to go anywhere or do anything. And I'm about to do some Japanese haiku. With nowhere to go and nothing to do. And the spring comes and the grass grows by itself. And we're sitting here just satisfied with the way things are.
That's good stuff.
Well, this is the second knowledge of 7 on the way to the fruit of Sotapanna. This is still a path. But now here's the next question. The question is, if you can get the mind into a state so that it can keep the hindrances out, but you're still thinking about things, what's the right thing to really think about? What is it that's worth your attention? And this is where we move from step 2 into stage 3, the third knowledge. And the third knowledge actually now is the full-on eradication of doubt, which means that the first 3 fetters are now being dealt with a mind that's fit for work. The mind that's in first jhana is now capable of doing what's needed to be done to see in depth about the Four Noble Truths. Now, in doing so, a lot of people don't understand how deeply revolving the Four Noble Truths and the teaching of Paticca Samuppada really are. That in fact, the Anapanasati, in order to do it correctly, after you have that state of sukha I was telling you about, to keep the mind in a state that'll keep you there, that's actually step 7 of Anapanasati, which is to observe the Sita Sankara. Now, we can observe them in 2 ways. One is we can observe them through the thought process, or we can observe them through the feeling process. But right now, we're going to work with the thought process first, because it's easier to deal with. And we're going to then put into the mind the things that are worthwhile thinking about, so as to have and bring on this eradication of doubt about what is and what is not, including the answer to all of our questions. Because you see, before this practice started, the kind of questions that people would ask would be about the past. It comes down to a basic form of what was I in the past, or what happened in the past to me. And the next is, what will happen to me, or what will I be in the future, in the sense of thoughts and feelings and situations and that kind of stuff. And this is not really wise attention, because it leads us nowhere. We've been doing that kind of stuff forever. So that's not something worth paying attention to. But what what is really, really most importantly worth paying attention to when we have a mind that is stable. We're going to apply it to something and keep it focused there. And what is that? The Four Noble Truths, in the sense of picking apart and understanding the really deep nature of suffering and how that's related to the second noble truth, which is what is the cause of suffering. And we're going to dig right down to realize the cause of suffering is something in here, not out there. And that's the eradication of the first doubt. Because the first doubt is, who's responsible for this mess? Is it some God? Is it my mom? Can I blame the government? How about the boss who just fired me? Can I blame all my troubles on him? And we wind up playing a blame game, trying to figure out who's responsible for the way I feel. Coming right into it now, we're slamming right into the fact that, and we don't like it, that all of suffering is self-imposed, without much of a self, in fact. In fact, if there were a better self, it would not impose this kind of stuff. So it's a pretty bad self that imposes all of this suffering. And so now we're beginning to understand the second noble truth. But in doing so, we don't allow that to bring us out of our state of satisfaction, because we do have the third noble truth. This is, in fact, the freedom from suffering. How I feel really content and happy right now is, in fact, the third noble truth. What else could I want if I'm really satisfied? So the real object of the first jhana is get into that sukha, get into that state of pleasure, get into that state of joy and satisfaction. And now we have to maintain it while we're really going to take some actual, in a way, some brain surgery and go fix this darn thing so that it's a feeling good machine instead of a feeling bad machine. And so the first doubt is, whose fault is it? That's the first repair that has to be made. The second then, which comes a bit later, but I'll introduce it to you, but it has a lot to do with, am I up to the task? Can I actually do this? Or am I going to fail at it? In other words, where's my little lion? Where's my success machine? I was in success. So now let me ask that question from the state of being successful. And then you begin to say, oh, wow, I've got to turn a lot of stuff around. Because a lot of stuff in my life has been heading in the wrong direction. And that the right thing to turn around is my attitude, so that I can stay in a state of satisfaction even when unsatisfactory stuff is going on. So now that's the second doubt. Am I up to the job? The answer is, yeah, I can do this. In a way, this is just more of that first one. Can I clean my mind out? The answer is, yeah, even when the going gets tough, I can clean it out. I have no doubt that I am responsible and I can do this. So now the confidence gets really strong. And then the third layer of doubt comes in. That third layer of doubt has the quality of, this path that I have been walking now that's gotten me this far is actually quite good enough, thank you. In fact, I now know what is not the path, and now I'm discovering what is the path. This Eightfold Noble Path, in fact, was started right from the very beginning of Anapanasati, but now you begin to see, oh no, this runs my whole life. To keep remembering, to keep applying right action, to right effort, to keep with that right effort, have the right attitude. And all of this is based in right view. And so this is what that gets really solid then at that first stage, or that third stage, is through the investigation of the Four Noble Truths. And there's another side of the coin. And that is, how does the mind actually work? Because how the mind actually works also needs to be discovered. And we want to do that discovery work in this first jhana that we are maintaining, because now is the time to start digging up and dealing with feelings now that we've got the thoughts more or less completely under control. And this is where we start dealing then with that second noble truth again, in the sense of how it all puts together, the ignorance that's involved and the bad feelings that's involved. And the bad feelings is I don't like it. And also how the good feelings, I like it, also winds up getting us into trouble. Because if we like something, then we start to want it. And now we're having also a feeling of dissatisfaction because I don't have it. In fact, this is what the Buddha puts up there is the number one thing, is wanting things you don't have. Wanting things you don't have, that's suffering. That is dissatisfaction. And the whole world runs that way. All of society runs that way. Everyone is supposed to be dissatisfied. That's what keeps the world going around. And I'm not talking about the actual physics of the planet. I'm talking about the economy. That money is only worth something because everybody is trying to grasp at it. Not just that they trust it enough to hound themselves after it.
Yeah, that's like a basic economic statement that everyone wants more, basically. And they're trying to get as much as possible. That's how prices come to be.
This is, in fact, now beginning to deal with the second fetter. The second fetter in the Pali is listed as Sila Bhatta Paramasa, and how it's defined is our attachment to rites, rules, and rituals. But a broader way of looking at it, a more even noble way of looking at it, is all of society and including money. And if we were dedicated to taking care of each other and keeping everyone satisfied in our community, there would be enough food, there'd be enough money. But it's because everybody is intentionally and taught to be dissatisfied. Then people try to hoard things, thinking that, oh, if I don't have extra, then I'll someday feel even worse. So let me start to collect things. Almost like they're trying to prepare for an emergency. That's why, like storms, when they know the hurricane is coming, the stores get empty.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe we can make a short detour to an example here. Like at my job, I'm earning somewhat less than I could according to my education and so on. And there's like another colleague who's really working a lot and trying to get our manager to pay her more and putting a lot of effort in there. And I'm kind of okay with how much I earn right now. I don't need much more, but there's also this nagging feeling of maybe I'm being sub-assertive and maybe I should put in more work to earn more, but then that stresses me again to a certain degree. So I've been kind of caught in between these poles of just accepting, but then maybe feeling I'm just avoiding conflict and
yes, please do.
Yeah.
Yes, please do avoid the conflict. Here is something that you can recognize, though, is that as you're beginning to wake up, out of your own stress, you can begin to see how other people stress themselves. That she's really working very, very hard. And sometimes that's put on her from social conventions. For instance, that women have to work harder to keep up with men. So she's got to work really hard to keep up with you when you're just doing ordinary. Please don't work harder. If you do, she'll have to work even harder. Have some compassion for this poor lady. Don't compete with her, be her friend.
Yeah,
Start telling her that you appreciate how much work she's puts in and you hope that the boss recognizes it. Ooh, jealousy.
it's more like I'm not competing with her, but she is going to the manager a lot and basically complaining and discussing that she should earn more and that she should get promoted faster and this kind of stuff.
You be on her side with that.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
You help her with that. That will take a lot of stress off of her if she knows that at least one person is on her side.
Okay. Without doing the same as she does.
Without doing anything that she's doing.
All
You don't
right.
have to change any of your behavior.
I guess it just rang true what you just said. It's like preparing for a catastrophe or something. Maybe in the future I'll need a lot of money or I'll be left behind if I don't do the same. And these types of thoughts arise then. So it just reminded me of that.
Yes. So, and this is how people do it. They prepare for a disaster, and by doing so, in some ways, they bring it on. There's a lot of folklore around that. But if you prepare intentionally to have no disasters, then that's more than likely what you'll bring about.
Hmm. It sounds a bit like law of attraction, like this attract what you're looking for.
Yeah, you can put it in magical terms if you want to, but it's clearly obvious. I mean, for centuries now, people have been able to see that, and they put magic into it or things like that. But it literally is part of your own satisfaction system. You see, if you prepare for disasters, you're already put yourself into a victim's position, which means that the things that happen to you will look more like they are a disaster. But if you've already got your mindset to where there really are no disasters, and whatever it was that came by, that's not a disaster. We can handle that. And it could have been, in fact, the same thing. The only thing that changed was not the disastrous incident, but how people were able to cope with it and manage it. And that can be anything from a police stop to a hurricane or a snowstorm.
But what if it's not preparing for a disaster, but kind of working towards a life that you want? So more of a positive motivation to do so?
This is exactly correct. That you're looking for with right noble view, and as your right noble view increases, you'll find ways out, up and out. Because that's in fact what we begin to do is we begin to see that there's not happiness in the world, that I've been so far attached to it and doing what it told me to do and following the rules and all of that kind of stuff. And by the way, following the rules without any satisfaction, and I didn't really want to follow the rules in the first place. So now we recognize, oh no, now we have a path to satisfaction. And that's the Eightfold Noble Path of the Buddha that gets us into that state of sukha, allows us to have little dhammanas, cool times, just, now it's good. Everything fits together. That's the way to live our life. And by one of the things that happens with people like that is they begin to withdraw from the world, begin to find more seclusion. This is the time when people, if they were doing it according to the ideal way, would be that on the path to Sotapanna is when people eventually ordain. But they do often for all kinds of social reasons or wanting things like experiences or enlightenment or something like that, rather than merely looking for the Sangha as a refuge from the world that they can find now to be not worthy of their efforts anymore.
I didn't get the last part. So one motivation that people who are not at Sotapanna yet is they want to ordain in order to get away from the world.
No, the getting away from the world is the right reason to ordain.
Okay.
Wanting to become both secluded and aloof. Aloof means above the world. Not in a bad way, but in a really wholesome way. This is what we would mean by noble, that we would rather always keep taking a noble position. And the more we stay in society, the more we have to be satisfied with unsatisfactory things. And so when we start to withdraw from that, so we just live a life where almost everything now is satisfactory. There really is nothing much. For instance, one of the ways of not having a flat tire to deal with is don't drive.
So it's very contradictory to the general, I guess you could call it rites and ritual and how you use it, the general view that you're supposed to be in the world and try to do something, make something better for other people. And
yes, if you have a mind that will not become worldly again. That almost all of the young people who go to work in Washington, D.C., go there with the idea of draining the swamp and fixing things. And a few years later, they become themselves part of the problem, because that's the structure and the way that the place works. They go into a system to fix it, and they wind up being a prisoner in it. And in fact, you can think about it like this. If you break into a prison, you're more than likely will be imprisoned, at least while you're in there.
then getting people out.
But one of the things you can do is you can call from the noble side of the fence and say, here's a hole, folks, here's a hole.
So you need a really solid foundation in order to let those things not touch you over time.
That's exactly correct. It takes a long time. But the best way to do it is by getting into seclusion so that you can get away from it all and really get things cleaned out and become really satisfied with the way things are. And then you start coming in slowly and doing a few things more and more. And eventually you can come in and handle things in a really noble way. That's the ideal way. But the more practical way is whatever situation that you're in, let's be as noble as often as we can. And let's develop sati that way, just right there in the midst of it. If we cannot, wait until we lose 30 pounds before we go to the gym. You get my point?
Sorry, the last one was,
do.
if we cannot, we can try to first lose 30 pounds and then do it.
There's no need to do that. Just go to the gym now. Okay, in that regard, if you're in the world, go for it. Stay in the Dhamma. Remember that that's in fact the right thing to do. That the reason, in fact, that we do a sitting meditation is to get away from the world long enough to get the mind straightened out a little bit. But while you're out all day long, your job is to keep it as clean as possible and get yourself back into a state of satisfaction anytime that you can think of it. And so, in a way, you're going to build the joy and the rapture on the cushion that you'll be having as an access because you've already started developing that skill. You'll have that when you need it. So the joy that you get on the cushion may, in fact, help you to actually change that tire joyfully.
Okay, so we're at the end, I think, end of point 3. Hello, hello. Hello. Hello.